All right, I'll officially call the meeting to order then. Welcome everybody. I've got to read our statement before we get started. It is Tuesday, December 8th, and it is 12:30 p.m. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means on November 4, 2020, in accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074. I determined that conducting meetings of the Provo City Transportation and Mobility Advisory Committee with an anchor location, such as the Community Development Conference Room, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I have made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus disease, also known as COVID-19, as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. The state of Utah is currently subject to a public health emergency order which requires people to wear face coverings and follow social distancing guidelines. Utah County is currently listed as having a high level of coronavirus transmission. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Community Development Conference Room. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/user/Provo channel 17. Okay. And good news, first person was vaccinated today in the UK, so we can all celebrate a little. Yeah, welcome everybody. So I'll just introduce. So I'm Clancy Black, TMAC chair. We've got Joy McMurray, TMAC vice chair, Mitsu Saito, TMAC member, and Laurie Urquiaga, who is a TMAC member and the Planning Commission representative. And then also we'll welcome city staff with us. Looks like Eric from UDOT is with us also. Welcome, Eric. Okay, so real quick up front, I have a work conflict, so I need to jump out at about 1 o'clock today. So I'm hoping we can get through items 1 and 2 before that, if possible. So let's jump right into item 1, which is change of meeting time in 2021.
So just to kind of hit this off, most of you know that Dave Shipley is actually our council member representative, and he generally attends this meeting. Most of you also know that because our meeting is actually scheduled on the second Tuesday of every month, that's also a council Tuesday. And so that creates a lot of conflicts quite frequently, not only with just Mr. Shipley, but with many of us as staff that we've been invited to be at those other meetings, and it's difficult to be in 2 places at once. So the suggestion was made that maybe we should change the meeting time of this meeting, TMAC. And so we just wanted to kind of open that up to see what everybody's availability was. I'm just going to throw it out there right now that Thursdays are generally easier as far as not as many conflicts with council and things like that. But just wanted to get your thoughts. First of all, is a lunchtime meeting the best time for all of you?
I hadn't thought about this till now. I think I've generally been okay with the lunchtime meeting. I think I prefer that to taking up the evenings, probably.
I agree with that. Evenings would be harder for me, but I could easily move to a Thursday lunch meeting.
Me too.
I actually can't. Lunch meetings are great for me, but I have a meeting every Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Oh.
So
okay.
We could find somebody else on the planning commission if that was the day that everybody else felt was best.
Robert, what are Wednesdays like for you guys?
Wednesdays are definitely better than Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lori, what's your Wednesdays like?
Wednesdays are generally open. And Mondays are always open for me, actually. I just have, it's actually every Thursday, every other Friday at 1:00 I have meetings.
Okay.
I'd prefer keeping it Tuesday or Wednesday, just because of Monday holidays and people traveling. I think that could get difficult. So I guess maybe Wednesday if Tuesday is the toughest day for staff. Maybe we try for a Wednesday.
Wednesday I have a meeting at 1, but can we start like 11:30? Is that?
Or even 11?
Yeah, 11 to 12:30.
11. Next month, 11 is not good for me. Come to think of it, that's right. I'm sorry.
Robert,
Used to be
just
afternoon.
Robert, this
If
is
we
Crystal.
did it, go ahead.
Sorry, just something else to know. If we ever do go back to in-person meetings, we also just need to be aware of other meetings scheduled in the conference room.
Right.
So
Which
Thursdays at 11:00 are actually okay for me. If we were to go Thursdays from 11 to 12:30, I'd be done before 1:00 and then I'd be okay. Or if we just did 11:30 to 12:30 for an hour.
Yeah. Turned out, for me, I remember I have teaching responsibility from 11 to noon.
On
Um,
Thursdays?
Monday through Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just remembered.
So is a Wednesday 12:30 an option then?
I have a meeting at 1.
Oh, every
Oh,
Wednesday?
So
Yeah.
it's always a real challenge. We just wanted to bring it up here. What I'll do is send out a doodle poll.
Okay.
That way everybody can fill in their availability, and I'll just let you know. You'll be able to see what those results are, and then we can decide through email if that's all right.
It's okay
and
with
then
me.
make that official.
Yeah.
Okay, Robert, what about not the council Tuesdays? Because those are the 2nd and 4th, right?
That's correct. So we could
So if-
alternate to either the 1st or the 3rd.
Oh, yeah.
Fine with
So
me.
yeah,
that's
that would
fine.
be something also to consider.
Okay, so I'll send all of those available times out in a doodle poll, and then if it's okay with everybody, we can just kind of finalize all that through technology means.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that maybe one day we'll be able to get back together officially.
Yeah.
But now we'll continue to do it this way, whatever time it is, and probably even have this option when we do get available for those that it's hard to make it down here to the city building. So.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. That sounds good to me.
Yep.
Okay. Item 2. Final version. Oh,
can you bring that up?
yeah. And this is a final version of response to the Center Street policy intent statement. Do we have that so we could show it on the screen again? And I guess while you're looking for that, I believe we had received the draft version with our comments via email, and then a few of us had some follow-up comments. I think that we're generally in the line of making sure there's design consistency.
Yeah, so that was the only major thing that had come up in response, Clancy. And so I was just going to add language to it that kind of explained that design consistency would be important to maintain, whether it's a small incremental project or a larger one. Just along those lines, just put that kind of language in it, and then if it's all right with you folks, I could send that on and then send it out to council.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Joy or Mitsu or Laurie, do you have any thoughts or on that? You okay with that?
I'm okay.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. I'll just put that general language in then, and then go ahead and send that out to you folks for one final approval. Just yay, it looks good. And so hopefully I'll send that on this afternoon, and then we could get that to the council by the end of the week.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks, Robert.
Uh-huh.
I'm excited to see that moving. That's good. I think we first discussed that Center Street stuff when we sent a recommendation to the council, one of our last in-person meetings. So it's cool. It's good to see it getting to the end of the row.
Yeah, I think that this is something that's really, TMAC has always been very interested in how Center Street is going to function in the future and how it currently functions, and sending that information onto the council allowed them to analyze it a little bit more and then send out their intentions and their statement of intent for Center Street. And it'll be good to get all of us on the same page for that. And actually, I think that's a good segue into item 3, unless there's any other discussion on item 2.
No, I think we can go right to item 3. Discussion of possible ways to implement the intent for Center Street. So, obviously, the council will still be. The general plan and potential council action that I don't even know what that might be, but they'll be doing what they need to do. For us in this discussion, I think the idea was for us to kind of discuss and provide input for staff as to what types of more immediate measures might be taken to kind of help us start moving in the right direction. Is that correct, Robert? Or it looks like you've got something else here now. Maybe maybe I should quit talking and let you talk.
No. You are definitely on the right track. Let's see. And so we had originally compiled a list of everything that's been talked about for Center Street over the last, several decades, actually, and sent that out to all of you to kind of review. Rob Hunter, Shane Winters, Dave Decker, and Jared Lillywhite over at Public Works were able to kind of compile all of those things into a table that showed that you're seeing here, the type of improvement, how that's described, and then just goes through each of those with regards to improving safety, pedestrian safety, reducing speed, diverting traffic, reducing parking, and how it affects the aesthetics of Center Street. And then also there's a cost breakdown. We were able to meet internally as staff and kind of come up to speed on what's possible, what can be done in the immediate future, and then also to strategize how to best approach this in the future. So public staff from Public Works is kind of going to go over this with the general idea that what we would like to establish and what we would really like TMAC to be involved in is establishing really good policy recommendations that we can send to the council every year that talks about improvements that should be made to Center Street, or recommendations that can be made to Center Street, and those actually become part of the policy of our city and what the council adopts. And so after Public Works kind of goes through their list of things, then we're going to talk about kind of the logistics of how that would work, the recommendations that TMAC would be making yearly, and when that would occur. So I know that Rob and Shane and Dave and Jared are all on the line. Gentlemen, is one of you going to be talking about that?
And Rob, what are the colors for the X's? What do those mean?
So we can scroll down.
Okay, primary, secondary, thanks.
So this is Rob Hunter. I can go through and do a quick overview. There's enough on here that I think it's probably better for y'all to take and just review them all instead of trying to fit a discussion of all of them into this first discussion. But what we did is we broke down what we felt like we could do within this next year, and would like some recommendations. What other recommendations, or not recommendations, other possibilities, because really we just put everything that had ever been recommended by anybody, not just staff, on here that we knew about, on here. And so we have stuff that we feel like if it's a recommendation to do, we could do it within the next year. Others that if it's a recommendation to do, we could do within, maybe the second year to maybe fifth year. In that time frame, it would we could make it work, but we would need to budget it. And then there's other items that would be expensive enough that it would be really outside of our regular budget. And if TMAC made the recommendation and council wanted us to move in a certain direction, it would, like I said, it would take some sort of funding that would be outside of our normal budget. And so actually, before I get started, either Crystal or Robert, is it all right if I actually bring up the one that's on my screen so that I can kind of scroll through as I'm presenting? There we go.
You bet.
Thank you. All right, can everybody see that same spreadsheet now?
Yeah.
Okay. So so we just went through and tried to, like I said, try to make a list of everything that we knew of that had been recommended over the years. And then Laurie, as you had asked, we tried to put on here what would be the primary purpose or the primary effect of doing that, or in some cases there's multiple primary effects. But then in a lot of things that have been proposed, there's not necessarily it's the primary purpose of doing it, but it would have a secondary effect. And we didn't try to put on here whether that was a good or a bad effect. It is going to affect. In some cases, it's going to be positive. In some cases, it's going to be a negative effect. So we tried to give that guidance. And then in terms of costs, we haven't done hard cost estimates on everything. These 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you'll see there's one that's a 5+, are just general instances of what everything would cost. One being we could, like I said, we could probably figure it out within this same year, up to the 3, 4s, and 5s, mostly being we'd need to figure out some funding outside of our norm. So starting with the items that we had identified as possibilities within this first year. This first one, we can go through these one by one, especially this first one, switching out the parking signs and posts to be closer to our standard. There's the current parking signs that we have along Center Street are a specialty post that is expensive, outside of our normal sign budget when we want to replace, or whether they, when they get run into and we need to replace them. And so it had been proposed, I think a couple of years ago, to switch out those with some powder coated, still nice looking posts, but more along the standard that we could more easily switch in and out when we needed to. And so that's one of the first proposals on here. The second one is kind of coupled with the well, let me go through, actually, as I go through here, let me go through the ones that are checkmarked. So these are ones where we feel like it was kind of already a plan to start doing these things. And obviously on all these, you TMAC members can tell us one way or the other, but these checkmarks are ones that we would kind of already planned and would be pretty easy for us to do. So the first one is switching out those parking signs and posts for more standard posts. The second one is install pedestrian crossing signs at all the mid-block crossings. This would be our just the standard crossing sign according to the METCD. We put that at all the mid-block crossings right now. They do not have any signage associated with them. They are the brick pattern, so they stand out a little bit more, but we could add the pedestrian signage to make things a little bit more aware. Another easy one is replacing the speed limit sign that at some point apparently was taken down or removed at westbound on 300 West. We could put that back up. And then the last one that we have on the check mark that we have discussed with UDOT is signal timing to try to optimize 100 North and discourage Center Street through traffic. I will advise, though, there's only so much that we can do. A lot of the signal along 100 North and Center Street is set to optimize the north-south traffic flow, and trying to keep an optimized north-south traffic flow. But then trying to also optimize a 100 northeast-west traffic flow. There's some things that we can do, and that we still need to work through with UDOT. It's going to be limited. It's not going to be a perfect solution with the volumes that we see on 500 West and Freedom and University. But those are the ones that in our minds were kind of easy. Yeah, we could definitely move forward on getting these things done. Discussing with UDOT as 500 West wraps up on timing to try to make 100 North the arterial as we have identified it in our transportation master plan. And before I move on to the other ones that we have identified within 1 year but don't have a check mark on there, are there any questions or any input on the ones that we do have a check mark on?
Rob, I want to.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry.
Sorry.
For 100 North, I've wondered for a long time if the signal at 100 West is really necessary. It seems critical for pedestrians. And so I wonder if as part of that 100 North optimization, we could look at removing or redesigning that to a pedestrian only type signal. I mean, certainly the north-south traffic is so minor that the signal, I don't know that it would even meet warrants for north-south traffic anyway, but that might be down further in your 5-year plan, but I think that's something we could consider, because removing an entire signal could do a lot to help incentivize 100 North.
And with my short time in this position, I don't know if Shane, do you have any input on that directly?
So Clancy, that's something we can look into. You need to understand. So Freedom Commons, there's a pretty large development and parking facilities that are coming between 100 West and 200 West. And so that area, and then by the Smiths, south of Smiths, is being completely redeveloped with some pretty high intense use, both vehicle and we're trying to help do that pedestrian accommodation and feel along Second North. So right now, I would say there could be, but I would say we need to kind of let that area develop some so that we could get a better understanding of what that is and what that may mean. Right now, I would probably recommend leaving that in until we have those larger developments, some residential, commercial, some high intense uses that we'd want to make sure that we got right. And that signal at 100 West may play into that. So yes, that's something we could probably put on here, Clancy, and have a discussion later once those areas develop out and we get a better pattern of what that is. That
makes sense. And yeah, as long as if we can just keep it on the radar, I think that's
because 100 West, we can time that any way we want. And we can make that so that intersection really functions well along the corridor and has, 100 North has that priority. for that, and works. The challenge is, as Rob said, is coming at the state facilities.
Right.
We have the ability to, with freedom, to kind of make that work kind of in the center of the corridor. The problem is you got two north-south large volume facilities. And so trying to really time those and make it really convenient can be somewhat difficult. So again, we will work with the state so that we can optimize that the actual best that we can. But like I said, Rob said, it may not be as good as some people may hope. So.
Okay.
I have a comment about the pedestrian crossing sign. Is that the kind of regular static one, or you're thinking about some lights or something around the panel, and then constantly the light is kind of flashing?
What we'd propose for this initial step is just the standard pedestrian crossing signs, not the flashing. The high visibility or the rapid flashing is a proposal further down, or a possibility that we have on here further down.
With the solar panel to get the electricity for that, I don't think it's really expensive, even if you add that kind of.
I could tell you
too. I was actually thinking exactly the same thing. I was about to raise my hand to make the same comment.
And I think that would be a perfect suggestion to put on here. That would be one. These are the things and suggestions we're looking for.
Yep.
Like I said, I think that's one that we could put on there and show as, a pedestrian improvement, safety improvement. But we'll have a secondary aesthetic effect that others may not like, with a continuously flashing light. So absolutely. That's the discussion we want to have.
Well,
and the other option might be to put one. I was just going to say the other option might be to have it flash by a button, so that it wasn't continuous, but
and that's down there on years 1 through 5. That's the flash, and
that's right here.
It's a rectangular rapid fired beacon. Like I said, those are somewhat costly. They do, and we need to budget that type of device in our budget. So how many or where we would put those right now would probably be at the mid-block crossings. It would be looking to you. Is that something we want to try, as one location, as a test? And these are some of the things we're looking at. Yep. And when do we start these? Is there some kind of gauge to say, okay, we put 1 year in, what are the performance metrics to say, we need to look at something else? So these are some of the, again, we're just throwing kind of everything at the wall and trying to get your ideas. Cause like I said, we're not saying these are what we should do or these are the right things to do. These are just all talking points on things that could be discussed.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is also,
and because Clancy left, we now don't have a quorum. I don't.
Yeah, okay.
And so let me tell you what we're trying to accomplish here today, and hopefully get our arms around it. So you see this big exhaustive list, and we could spend hours going through and talking about individual projects on this list. And we just don't have time today to do that, nor do we have a quorum. And so there's a couple of things that we want to accomplish. On the list Rob has shown you, there on the far left are those check marks. Okay, so let me take one step back. TMAC has looked at the councils and other groups' vision for Center Street, and now you have made your recommendations to council on the vision. And so that's going to go back to council, and they'll have that. Then to implement that vision, here are a whole list of possible things that we could do. So when you look on this list of the world of possibilities that we've come up with so far, it's not exhaustive. There may be other ones that come in. The ones that you see on your screen on the left that have the check marks are ones that as staff, internally as we've looked at it, we've said, we think these might be something that we could do and do relatively quickly here in the near future. We would like you to discuss those 4 items and see if it's something that you want to send to the council as a recommendation to do on Center Street. If it doesn't have a check mark by it, for various reasons, whether it's money or maybe there's some complicated circumstances surrounding a different type of project, we're not prepared as staff to recommend that we could go forward with these. We think they need more conversation. Like we were talking about the pedestrian signs, a flashing sign. Some people may like that. Some people may see it as more visual clutter. And so that's not an easy one. We think we need to have more discussion on that. So we want to accomplish 2 things. One, on those 4 specific items, we would like you, even though we don't have a quorum, to have an informal discussion. And then based on that discussion, we'll forward these 4 items on to the council along with the recommendation on the vision. The second thing we want to accomplish is we have all of these other projects that are larger, more complicated, that need more discussion. We want to go through a process where we talk about these, talk about the projects and the pros and cons, the cost and benefit of doing them, and ultimately get recommendations from TMAC, whether you advise the council to move forward on these or not. And we like to have that wrapped up no later than our meeting in October of the coming year. Because a lot of these, as you can see, it's not going to happen overnight. Some of these we need to implement before we implement others. And we need to implement it and see how things go. Others, types of project, because of the costs, we may need to be really sure this is what we want to do and budget for it and put it into our capital improvement plan coming up. And so if we can have that initial work done by this October, then we can have a good program where we know the types of projects we want to do. We have a sense of the budgeting and the timing and sequencing for these projects. And we have a discussion and understand the cost and benefit of doing any individual project. Then from thereafter, every year, we'd like to update this list to see, have a review, how are things going, and update them. So the first thing we'd like to do, and we need to, is let's focus on those 4 items that we have of whether as members of TMAC individually, since we don't have a quorum anymore, whether you think those are good projects that we should move forward with. And these are projects, the reason they have check marks is as staff, we think that we could implement these fairly quickly in the near future and then be able to have them there. And then while we're going through in our upcoming meetings, the rest of this list and coming up with a proposed plan and recommendation to the council of how to implement the vision through specific projects, we'll be able to get feedback on how these first 4, if they are implemented, are going. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? So
I'll jump in and say that those 4 items all seem reasonable to me. My one question is, I would think that Sharrows ought to be also part of that because they're so inexpensive and easy, and if there's a reason why that was omitted, I'd like to know.
Sure. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you think more than this 4 should be included in that initial list to the council, then and you think it should be recommended, then we want you to say that. Now, I can tell you as staff why we don't have that as a check mark. it is easy to do, and it is relatively inexpensive. It is, though, something that we should really think about. From our perspective, having more bicycles on Center Street, especially with angled parking, where people back up into traffic, we might need a little more of a discussion than, yeah, let's just go paint them tomorrow. To really talk about that and see, does this really make sense for us? Do we want to do this? Are there alternatives to a Sharrow that could make it safer? Then, you know, number one, do we want to invite more bicyclists onto Center Street? And if we do, is there a safer way of going about that than just painting Sharrows? Because you're right, just to paint them is a pretty simple, straightforward project. But the consequences of that kind of policy going forward, because once you do that, we're saying, all right, all the world, we want bicycles down here. If you got a bicycle, right on Center Street. Are we really sure we want to do that? And that's why we didn't check it, because as staff, we thought that one might need a little bit more nuanced conversation than we have time for to do just today.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because like Gary said, there may need to be other things that need to be implemented first before you start going down. Yeah, this is a bike area, bike path area. There may be some of these others that we probably need to do first before we can make that more of a safe bicycle facility for that area.
Yeah, I would think that it would have to be at least simultaneous with adjusting the signal timing, or maybe after. Although one recommendation, and this is a much bigger thing and not something to go into right now, but maybe adjusting things so that the parking is in between the automobile traffic and the bikes, so that the bikes are actually closer to the sidewalks. And so that's a much bigger question. But if I do think inviting bikes downtown is a good idea, the implementation of that probably is a bigger question.
And that's exactly why it's not on there. Because the ones with the check marks, as staff, as we looked at it, our initial reaction is these 4 projects make sense regardless of what else we do. These are pretty easy ones to do and would make sense.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I'll stop talking so other people can.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great catch and a great question of why. And this is exactly what we want TMAC to do, is analyze this and take a look at it and ask questions about why. Okay, staff, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do that?
Shan, I have a question. Is the signal on Center Street coordinate for 15 miles per hour? I forgot.
No. So the signal on Center Street is not coordinated at all.
Okay.
That was something that we have done so that we don't. Yeah, it is not coordinated on Center Street and Freedom.
Because
along that corridor, because 15 miles an hour is almost really difficult to signal time, as a coordinated effort. And so it is not along Center Street in any fashion coordinated. So coordination's given right now priority on, again, 5th West, University Avenue is the biggest coordinated with because of the bus transit system. And then Freedom Boulevard, and then East-West is not coordinated at all on Center Street.
Yeah. So regarding the speed, we need some way to let the drivers know that this is 15 miles per hour street. And if the signal is coordinated that way, drivers will notice if I drive faster than 15 miles, I'll get stopped somewhere. Or if you have when I was in Charlotte, it was so many years ago, they already had the speed sign and said this street is coordinated for example, 20 miles per hour right now, something like that. So the drivers knew what kind of speed is the optimal in a way to go through that particular section of the city. So need I think a physical way to tell the driver that this is a 50 miles per hour. If you just talk about the policy or whatever, drivers will not follow. They need a physical.
So I can tell you just kind of more of the tech, Dr. Satsu, is the problem that we get into is the PED clearance issues. So as soon as we start to get PED clearance, and this is a heavily PEDed area, our coordination goes, it completely goes out of coordination.
I see.
And so that's where it becomes extremely, extremely difficult. As soon as a PED pushes that button, it starts to take things out of coordination. And sometimes it can take a while to get back in. So that's one of the challenges with where there's a high PED use.
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts to chime in with. Laurie, I really liked your question about the bikes, and I think it points out that with many of these things, we have to layer them like Gary was talking about and say, this happens, so then this can happen, so then this can happen. If we're adjusting parking, maybe that'll make it easier to bring bikes downtown. So I'm glad that this is a discussion we'll be having in the future. If it's possible to send out this chart to us to look at before the next meeting, that would be really helpful so we can start thinking through it. As for and I know that Clancy will have lots to say about biking on Center Street because he does that often. Regarding the 4 check marks for today, I have a couple of questions. That first one, switch out parking signs and posts with standard. Rob, you said that they're currently specialized. Is there any disadvantage to switching out those specialized ones with standard parking signs?
The only thing that it does is those specialized ones, are a little bit. It sets it apart, I guess, a little bit on Center Street. That's the reason why they were installed there in the first place. But there's from a budgetary standpoint, I mean, the plus is that it is the powder coated are a standard or a more typical thing that we could more easily get. And I
think there's our downtown
concern to continue.
There's our downtown. There's our downtown. What is it? Streetscape standard. These fit that streetscape standard. So right now downtown usually has that painted, the powder coated green. We're going away. That's all been, and as part of the new downtown street stand, it's the black powder coated. So as part of that downtown street stand there's this aesthetic overall scheme that has been adopted and put in place. That is part of that.
Okay.
And again, the plan was, this had been talked about, I think, and maybe Shane, exactly, but my understanding is a couple of years ago, and it took us a couple of years worth of streets budget or signs budget to save up enough of these powder coated to replace them all at once, so that we weren't, so it wasn't looking half done down on Center Street. So we're ready to do that now, and they're easier to maintain.
Okay. The second item doesn't have a check, but I'm just not sure. What does leading pedestrian interval mean?
So a leading pedestrian interval would basically mean that you start the pedestrians walking for maybe 3 to 10 seconds before you turn the signals on, the green light on for the vehicular traffic. And it basically makes it to where the pedestrians are already crossing the street and makes everybody more aware that they're moving, so that not everything is turned on at the same time. This is something that we'd have to coordinate with UDOT. It's an idea that came up, but we haven't fully vetted that out to see exactly how that would be implemented at these intersections.
Okay, thank you. The third item, the second check mark, install pedestrian crossing signs at the mid-block crossings. Would those signs go how close to where the drivers are would those be? Are those like right there by the crosswalks or off to the side a little? I'm just curious, how visible are those going to be?
They would be just off the street. Yeah, so they'd be up next to the travel lane. I mean, I think in all the locations along Center Street, there's a planter box that comes out on the mid-block crossings, and so they would be in the planter box. I don't remember exactly how far it is, but it's only about a foot. You know, the sign's basically a foot off from a foot or two back from the travel lane.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Also, so I think all four of these seem, like you said, easy to implement, could do quickly. Are there any of these that would be messed up if we do them first rather than later? I don't know what's further down on those, but it seems like they could all be done quickly and won't have an impact on if we're making a change later that would then make these obsolete in some way.
And I think that's probably where we would look to you. Is there maybe one or two of these that you feel that are not checked, maybe in the first year, or maybe even in that year 1 to 5, that you would say, yeah, we would like you guys to maybe look at this, right? Like I said, I can tell you from the concerns that we've had on Center Street, mainly right now is one, is speed. We've gotten a lot of comments back from various committees, the public on speed. And the other one is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The ability to cross at the mid-block crossings.
Yeah.
Feel safe.
Aware and stopping for the pedestrians. Yeah.
Those are the two major ones that we have gotten to say, is there something that we can do about those?
Well, and to answer your answer your question more, I guess, is I think all of these, there's possibilities that have been brought up that are on this list that completely change the cross section in different ways. And so anything that we do on here could be, if we implemented the final ones way further down on the list, is going to redo the entire Center Street cross section. But those are again much further down on the list.
So I have two more comments. One is the pedestrian crossing signs at the mid blocks are critical. I would hope that as you do that, it's an upgradable option so that if lights are going to be installed later, it won't have to be a full replacement. And I would also, and I know this is a little bit more expensive, but look at identifying it as a pedestrian mall as soon as it's reasonable to do that, because I think drivers feel like the streets belong to them. And so if that were a pedestrian mall, identified as a pedestrian mall, that might also encourage the 100 North transition. And that's all.
So Robert, and Gary, since we don't have, I guess, a quorum, and I think we're kind of looking maybe for these initial recommendation that we could start again, as Gary said, this is the process that we want to start. This is something that we want to visit, once a year, so that we continue down the path of meeting the intent statement that the council has set out and that you guys are recommending. So that process is in place, that we have once a year, we come to this, whatever that meeting is, we talk about these items, and start an implementation process. Once a year, we do these, and then the following year. So right now, the question would be, because we don't have those items as a recommendation or those kind of things, Robert, what is your suggestion to do this as a follow-up meeting, so that we can start this recommendation and move down that path?
Excuse me. I, given that we can't actually make a formal recommendation, the 3 members that are on here can still, say that they would like to see this go forward. They can't vote on it, but they can express the meeting. Gary?
How about if we approach it like this? This is what I would suggest we do. And unfortunately, we lost our quorum, which is okay. Based on what I'm hearing, I would propose that as staff, we'll forward on to the municipal council. And we had a quorum for the finalizing of our recommendation on the council's intent, our vision statement on Center Street. So we'll forward on that. We'll also forward on this list and these 4 items to the municipal council as a recommendation that if it meets now, a recommendation from members of TMAC that the city move forward on these 4 items. Then at our next meeting, we will begin the formal process of looking at all of these other items. We can add items into that list as we go along. And we will have a goal of coming back no later than October of a recommended plan to the council to implement in some fashion these items. Some of them may not make the final recommendation. We may add in some others. Also, as we go along, we may find 1 or 2 that we say, no, we think this is really good. We ought to get started on it and not wait till October and go ahead and send an early recommendation on to the council. But we'd have first the intent statement go to the council. Second, those 4 items go on to the council with a recommendation that the council approve these 4 projects. And then at our next meeting in January, we'll start the formal process of vetting all of these projects so that we understand the cost and benefit, the implications of these projects, so that by October, we can come with a formal recommendation to the council on how these projects can be implemented to execute the vision that we have for Center Street. And we can't take a formal vote, so just your informal reaction to that would be great.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Gary, I don't know that I'm super comfortable saying when we don't have a quorum and we haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at this list, saying, hey, this is TMAC's recommendation, which I realize that's not what you're saying. You can say some
it wouldn't be TMAC's recommendation.
I don't think we can say that. If you want to say some members think these are great ideas, it might be more appropriate at this point to say this is city staff's recommendation. TMAC.
And you got to understand what these check marks are. These check marks are city staff. What we are saying is we could do these. And we think these types of these types of project would make sense to do. Regardless of what we do in the future. If we radically redesigned Center Street, we'd still think mid-block pedestrian crossing signs make sense. And so we think that we can do the remaining projects, we need more discussion. And so if we could do this by email. We could do this by email, and we could send out to the other members of TMAC these 4 projects and see if we can't get by the end of the week a formal approval by TMAC as a recommendation, or we could just send these 4 projects on to council and then inform council that TMAC will be going through this process.
One question I have is if we give the go ahead to these 4 projects, does that use up the majority of your budget for the year? Or does that preclude us from doing something further down the list, which we haven't even looked at further down the list? This is my first time seeing this, so I don't know yet how things stack up priority wise. These look like great ideas. They seem like great first line ideas, but I just haven't even looked through the whole list to know how it fits together.
So Joy, these items I can say for Public Works, for us, those checklists are within our budget. We can make those happen and it's not a problem.
Correct.
Again, like Gary mentioned, the other ones may have some budgetary issues that we would need to work through if we tried to do them as soon as possible. And some of those too also have some implications that we probably still need to discuss, not just budget, but some other implications that kind of need to be morally more vetted before we move on with those. But the ones that we check there, those have no issue. We can move forward with those right now.
And it won't preclude us adding to our top priorities list later.
Not at all.
Correct.
Okay.
Nope.
We
Then
wanted some easy, low-hanging fruit that we thought would make sense on Center Street, almost regardless of what else we do.
Okay.
We thought they're within budget, they're fairly easy to implement, and could be done fairly quickly. And so that's why you have only those 4 checked.
Okay. Then I will go with Laurie and with Mitsu and say I feel good about those. Those all seem pretty obvious. Good ideas.
We'll go ahead and we understand it's not a formal recommendation to the council by TMAC as a whole. It's just this conversation that we've had with TMAC members, and we'll make sure the council understands that, but we'll forward on these 4 recommendations or these 4 projects as things that could be done, and that we as staff will recommend to the council that they do those, and then we'll ask the council to approve these projects. And then we'll also send TMAC's formal recommendation on the vision for Center Street. And then when we get together next time, we'll have an approach on how we can systematically go through these projects to come up with a recommendation, a full recommendation no later than October.
And you'll be sending out this spreadsheet to us in the meanwhile.
Yes, we'll get this sent out. We can get this sent out today, I'm sure.
Yeah, let me just fix this one error that I'm seeing here where you can't see half the the wording, and then
an exhaustive list. This is things that staff has we've thought about over the years, or we've heard other people or groups mention over the years. And so there may be something else on this that TMAC should feel free at our next meeting to bring up. And we'll start organizing this and coming in with a systematic way to come in and really look at all of the implications that these things have. Because at the end of the day, I think as staff, our response to the council would be, if this is what you want to do, we can do it. We just want to make sure you understand the budget implications and you understand the implications or consequences of doing this. If you fix something over on this side, often it has an impact on the other end of that street. And so you've got to think through both of those things.
And some of these may require us to do some really public outreach, some things. If this is something that we determine that, we want to proceed down, we would, if it's very substantial and those kinds, that's things that probably require some substantial public outreach and really gain understanding from the public's perspective on starting to move forward towards that. so that we have all stakeholders involved in something that could be fairly impactful to their stake in Center Street, whether that's a business, whether that's, vehicle mode, mobility, whether that's bicycle and active transportation, whatever you're feeling your stake is in the Center Street, things that are substantial probably will require some kind of public outreach and gaining a perspective, an overall perspective before moving forward with something that's too drastic, I would say. And those are usually the ones that are more in the 5+ year range, that are gonna need some really extensive follow-up.
And I really like the idea of testing things out before we necessarily apply them over the entire span of Center Street. There's lots of options here of things we can try. So that'll be great to talk about those things.
And I think that brings up a good point, Joy. And that's some of these things as we go through this kind of on that yearly process. If there's something like, we like that idea, but we'd like to try it out, then yeah, let's do something to test that, like whatever that may be. A reduction in lanes. Let's start looking at how we could test, do a test thing without doing anything but do a test with that. I think that's something that absolutely we would probably encourage, and something that we could discuss and start going down that path.
I'd like to do some sort of interim design measure, Joy, before we spend a couple of $1 million on something that's kind of permanent.
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
And I think too, from a higher perspective, there may be some other regional type projects that are going on that that we may want to wait, that would have a substantial impact on Center Street, such as like an interchange along a new interchange on I-15 that will most likely undoubtedly change Center Street in some fashion. And we may want to wait until we understand what that is.
Yeah, Shane, when are we going to hear more about that? Do we know?
So I have had discussions with the state. Right now, they are looking to start. They've completed kind of the phase 1 of the environmental document, which is a lot of the data gathering of existing conditions, so that they can start moving on to phase 2, which would be starting as part of the NEPA process, defining the purpose and need of the project. They're hoping to start, my understanding is in the springtime. A lot of this is because of the COVID kind of things. Is some of this is going to require a lot. What they're doing is going to require a lot of public involvement, and so they're really taking their time to make sure that that can really happen in an appropriate fashion. So what I've been told again is probably springtime, they hope to kick that phase 2 and start defining that purpose and need portion of the NEPA process.
So we won't know anything for a while, basically.
Yes,
okay.
Correct. Yeah, but when that does kick up, you will be the first, you will be a part of that. We will be inviting, the state to include you and have meetings about that. So you will be involved and have first-hand knowledge of what's proceeding and how they're moving forward.
Great.
Robert Mills, I think we've got our arms around this issue. What else was on the agenda? I can't remember.
I think that's it for today.
Is that?
That's all for today.
That is our Christmas present to you, is ending at a reasonable time. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. And thank you for the gift card too.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I already used it.
we really appreciate everything that you do for us. You're volunteering your time, and it's a hard thing to go through. There's lots of issues, and you've been very patient and willing to work through these things with us. And I'm really excited about this list and this process that we can go through. I think we can really have a plan that can be implemented that will really hopefully impact Center Street in a way that people would like to see and make sense for Provo. So thank you so much for being willing to serve. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Alrighty, everyone. Any other items? Other than that, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Great. I don't want to dig into
Okay.
the list more until we have a quorum, so we can wait till next month. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
if you have a question about something on the list when you get it, don't hesitate to email me or Robert or Rob or Shane. We'd love to make sure you understand what we're talking about. And if you have new ideas, let us know, and we can add those to the list for discussion. So thank you. Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.